There she is, the random lady voice. Um, Thanks for jumping on and doing this.
Pleasure.
I was actually chatting to the lovely Kate Solomon yesterday.
Oh, for Link.
And she's amazing, isn't she? Oh, she's like a force of nature. She's great. I'd like to be her sister or something. She's brilliant. Listen, Daisy, we've spoken about Magpie. I just think it's a fantastic film. It's just I found it a real breath of fresh air. I think there's so many elements to it that are so exciting for you all in terms of kind of this being almost like a springboard into kind of where it can take you all in different, in all these different roles, whether that be writing, directing, producing, acting as well. But Sam, we've not talked, so I'm going to start with you if that's all right, because I
Sure.
want to get your kind of your version of kind of getting the script and reacting to that and what it was about the story and how visual it was, and then also bringing your own vision into that as well.
Sure. I mean, it was a very exciting script to get. Tom has just done such a beautiful job. It was a massive page turner. I remember the experience of reading it. It was very compulsive, and I didn't know where it was going truly. And so obviously when I got to the ending, it was a huge surprise and very, very exciting. So I was just like, it felt very assured and kind of very lean, but in a kind of exciting way. So in that sense, it felt quite action driven in terms of following Annette, particularly, and Ben and that central couple. So yeah, I liked its leanness and its kind of sense of direction. It really felt like it knew what it was. And I was very excited by that. I was very drawn to Annette's character, and knowing that Daisy was going to play Annette was extremely exciting. So those two elements made a lot of sense in the reading of it. And yeah, it was just very, very exciting.
Did the project kind of come from Tom and Daisy about the idea of we want to work together, we want to create something together, or was it just a kind of more organic journey in terms of an idea came up? Daisy, I think you had the kind of initial idea, then Tom, you wrote the script. What was the kind of, was it, did you have that want to work together in this sort of dynamic, or was it just a kind of following the story?
We had one of those strange things where a friend of mine we had spent New Year's with, and we had all talked about our New Year's resolutions. And then when we were doing this, he was like, don't you remember saying that you wanted to work together? I was like, oh my God. And I weirdly couldn't remember saying it, but I had read Tom's writing, and his other scripts are very different to this, but it's so beautiful. But in this way, it came together more organically because we had talked about it in the past, but this was very much like an idea came, Tom, will you write it? And then it all sort of snowballed from there in quite an organic way.
Where did the idea come from? What did you watch? What did you see? What did you experience?
I experienced being on a set with a little girl, and she was unbelievable. And it was a strange time. So it was either on set surrounded by people or super alone. And I was away. I was in Canada, and we all know that sort of the lockdown feeling of, aside from all of the other fear of what was going on, it was so isolating. And then of course those relationships you build on set, which are built so quickly anyway. So it was really the idea of this relationship building very quickly, originally between a woman and the girl playing her child. So that was actually the original thing of a woman trying to infiltrate a family. And that's what Tom had originally started working on. So it really came from, the original thing was those relationships on set.
Yeah.
And then Tom really took it in the direction that it ended up really going in.
And what was that kind of, what inspired or influenced that journey, Tom, in terms of the development of the script from, where you started to kind of where it ended up that Sam then shot?
It was really, I mean, Daisy, as she said, when she brought the idea to me, and asked if I'd like to write it, I thought, as we've said, I was very, very excited about making something with Daisy, on a personal and creative level, but also writing for her, being one of my favorite actors. I thought, God, this is so exciting. But the idea itself was so interesting to me, that idea of who people are, what they desire, how real that desire is, what their intentions are. The idea really that everyone is kind of both putting on a mask, as we all do as human beings, but also believing in the mask that we put on others, you know, that will project onto someone that we believe them to be something, and we don't see behind that. That whole idea fascinated me, and it was something that I thought, yeah, I'd love to do that. I don't know how much we've spoken about the speed at which I was asked to then write the first draft. Very, very, very fast. I think it was about 3 weeks, 3 or so weeks.
Wow.
What, you know, first draft, give us the structure, give us, it doesn't need to be, it was definitely not what you saw. But that idea was so exciting to me. And as Daisy said, I changed the initial idea purely because as I was writing more and more, this man taking his daughter to set and projecting, and the desire and what that does to the family unit, I became more and more interested in this woman left at home. I found her strength and her resilience to hold this family together despite this thing happening to her, directly to her and in front of her. I just thought, what an amazing character, and said to Daisy quite early on, I don't think that the actress should be the lead. I don't think this should be our protagonist. This woman left at home that we overlook and underestimate is fascinating to me. And I think we should pin the main narrative on her. And as soon as I did that, Daisy was beautiful and open about it, you know, because I think the original idea was for Daisy to play the actress and it to be a story like that. But as soon as Daisy allowed me to pivot, it almost wrote itself, because I could just allow that story to happen outside the house and be left alone with this character and what she then does with that pressure and that pain inflicted upon her.
It's so clever because it's as far as I was just thinking there of like it's almost like this amalgamation of like I don't know, like Motherland meets Fatal Attraction meets The Hand That Walks the Cradle. It's kind of like this kind of, because there are so many moments like, you know, being a mum and sort of feeling that isolation and feeling like you kind of are almost losing that reach of you and what inspires you and what makes you feel alive as a person, not just as a mother. It's so clever, it's so brilliantly written, you know, and so beautifully observed and so kind of perfectly played as well, Daisy, you know, in terms of like the scene in the park. And oh my God, yeah, it's just so brilliant. But also like that side of it where you give us a glimpse into set life as well. You know, you kind of, there is so much going on in this, you know, in the film. It's so clever. And Sam, I wanted to ask about kind of, you know, the choices in, you know, locations and stuff as well, because they're characters in themselves, whether it's the, you know, with the house particularly.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tom, Daisy, and I and Kate were all really involved in choosing all the locations, really, because they were like key. They're so key, especially the house. So the house is obviously, and we searched a lot. Like we went on a lot of recce's. There was a lot of discussion about that house, and you know, I suppose for some reason, large modernist like glassy houses are a kind of visual theme of the sort of thrillery noiry genres, even so far back as Hitchcock, really. If you look at, you like Rear Window or whatever, obviously it's not a glassy house, but the idea of looking in, I think, or someone being trapped within the walls of something. So I suppose, like, I think we all like the house because it was so huge. I mean, it's almost like too huge. It's like heightened huge for her to be like lost within it, and to look at it and go, God, that's a dream house. Wouldn't you love to live there? But then with the wrong person, it's a cage. It's a nightmare house. And I think that idea of being isolated in the countryside, which was very much there in the script, but the idea of having the perfect life, but just far away, you know, just a nice house in the wrong place and with the wrong person kind of thing.
How much did that feed into performance as well, Daisy, you know, in terms of having that kind of physical landscape and environment to kind of to play with?
Well, it was interesting because we started in the house. So by the time we were done there, it felt super claustrophobic. And as a place with that much space, it felt closed and it felt close. We all felt very close to each other. And it was an interesting dynamic, which I think you can feel in the film too, when I was there alone or with the baby, but alone in terms of social interactions, it feels empty and it feels full. It feels both things, but not in a great way, full of sort of oppression, I suppose. And then when Hiba comes in as Tilly, it was so full of life and joy. And that really was something that I had hoped we would find, particularly with such an amazing little girl playing Tilly. But you could really feel whenever she came in, because suddenly you're with a child and everything is playing and sort of protecting her from the reality of what the story was, really. So it was quite distinct differences when I was there with the baby, when I was there with her, when I was there with Shaz, who plays Ben, and then the fantastic dinner scene. So the house actually, like you say, it felt like a character in terms of taking on almost a different persona when anyone was in there. But certainly the majority of the house, I'm there just with the baby, and it ended up feeling like somewhere we wanted to leave. Like we were happy to leave there.
Yeah, I never want to have a house like this when I'm next house hunting.
Yeah.
Try before you buy. But it's also those kind of I think what's extraordinary about your performance, one of the many things that's extraordinary, is that because there are a lot of moments where there's no dialogue, but we're learning a lot. You know, in terms of it might be just the way that you are existing, she's existing in that situation, or it may be a glance, or it may well be that the way she reacts to something verbally, sort of thing as well. Was that a kind of a really fun thing to kind of play with in terms of how much of the story you're telling without there being lots of dialogue and script and interaction with people? Or is that terrifying?
Well, it's interesting because I don't think I've ever done anything with loads of dialogue. So it's actually, yeah, which I think is just a strange thing that has happened. But certainly I found, and particularly in the last few weeks, as people have been watching it, I've been really struck by the moments in the piece that people connect to, things that I wouldn't particularly have thought people would connect to. So 2 people in the last couple of days said the washing the cup moment. I thought, oh, interesting. But I mean, someone gave it a much better, what did they call it? Performance-driven tension or something, which is obviously much more articulate than I would be. But it ended up feeling, I think Tom's script was so specific that I knew what every beat was. And of course, when we're there and me and Sam are existing in that space and doing and actually filming it, it can take on a different sort of life. But certainly it was so clear what was happening and what Annette was doing and what Annette was thinking at every time. It was quite, it was sort of amazing getting to those scenes because it felt so full and so rich. And also I think that's something that is such a joy about being with a character from the very beginning and building Annette from, you know, this little seed of an idea, is I felt so intimately like I knew her, that all of it made sense. But it has been, and to be honest, I think the film generally has been so interesting, the different ways that it's resonating with people, that I think has almost taken me aback a little bit, because we wanted to make an entertaining film. And of course, I knew that Tom had created these beautiful layers and a conversation about being a parent. And to your point about Kate, who we made it with, she was fantastic with all of that, because one of the things I really wanted to make sure is that that Annette was not a bad mum. It's just difficult and it's isolating, and she's trying to find that identity that she had before the kids, and she's trying to go back to work. And so I'm amazed and really thrilled actually by the levels of response and the layered response that people have to Annette particularly.
Tom, was the ending always going to be the ending? How do you write an ending? I find, is that the hardest part in writing a script, is writing the end?
Do you know, it's funny, back to the fact that this was all Daisy's fault. I didn't have the original idea. You know, usually by the time I even share, I call it a first draft, but it will often be probably the 10th. By the time share it with Daisy, who's my first person. I've already mapped out the whole where it's going. I decide a theme very early on and how to bring that to a satisfying and appropriate conclusion. With this, it was super interesting because I didn't have that. You know, I didn't quite know where it was going. So the simple answer to your question is no, it wasn't always going to end that way. There was a very early version where the scene at the trailer park where Ben believes that he's, how much can we say on this, by the way? Is this spoiler free?
I'll put a spoiler at the front for people.
That.
So that if they, let them know there are spoilers within it, or if, to pause now and watch the film and then.
Because effectively, like the end of Act 3, really, of when Ben is tricked, that was going to be an original idea for me. I thought, what comeuppance can this character have that's both poetic and appropriate for his character? And he's a narcissist who cares so much about how he's seen, back to that idea of the mask. To have that mask ripped away publicly and publicly shamed was appropriate, I thought, at first. But it did lack some drama, I think. And then I sort of wanted to explore actually what happens after that moment, that Annette's really pushed this, this game she's playing with this little mouse, she's pushed it that far. What can then happen afterwards? The confidence, the strength that she can have, and the resolve to do what she knows she now, because Ben's action around that really condemns him, his choice of himself over his daughter, his, where his attentions and cares lie, really does solidify in Annette that she is right in doing and thinking what she does. And so the ending that I decided on, and actually we all did, we were chewing this idea around for a while. I knew I wanted it to be linked to the phone because it is one of the most important themes and characters in the piece. This idea that Ben brings about his own downfall. Annette only allows him the road with which he walks down. She's constantly just choice. She never tricks him into anything. She just allows him to his own hubris and ego to cause his destruction. So it needed that momentum of he's not looking where he's going. He's paying attention to something fake when the reality in front of him is so literally coming towards him. So that's where that came. But in another, you're right. The ending of a film is really hard, and we often talk about it, Days and I. The amount of films that you're like, you don't know where to end, man. Like you get like 5, 6 endings. You're like, you want that. The end is the final knockout punch, right? And if you're just hammering, it can feel repetitive. So I wanted, again, with the tone of a lean piece, just have a clean hit knockout.
Of which he deserved.
Sorry?
Geez, of which he deserved that ending. Oh my God. Your poor mate. I mean, he's your mate. Chaz is your mate.
I knew he could take it.
Oh, whoa. I mean, God, I think I've really kind of hated anybody, and I was like, oh, you prick. You mentioned the phone stuff, and Sam, I wanted to ask you about that because I think it's such a clever way, of representing and featuring that side of it, that messaging on screen. It's a hard thing to do in terms of stylistically, creatively, of how do you do that? How do you represent that part of the story visually? How did you come to the decision and how you did it? 'Cause it's so great.
Sure. Well, I think it was about wanting, as you say, to do something that didn't become repetitive. So the first step was like just watching a lot of films where phones are like featured. So Personal Shopper, they use a phone really well, and it's really simple. Like it's actually just sort of filming the phone, I suppose. So I looked at lots of those things. And then I guess it was like about trying to really sell their relationship. So seeing them together as much as possible. So actually seeing them in scenes together, even though they were texting. And I really love like close-ups anyway. When you have someone like Daisy as well in close-up, that's very exciting. So the phones were an opportunity to really get in there and do a sort of break the fourth wall a little bit and kind of put the audience a little bit in their shoes to try and create, I suppose, a bit of the feeling of what it's like when you're starting something like that. So that was a sort of response to all of those things, to try and make the affair, so to speak, have as much like visual time as possible, so that we believed it as hard as possible, so that when it was revealed us otherwise, we'd be shocked and delighted, hopefully.
Let's talk music, because it's kind of beautifully part of the film, both in terms of Isabel's score, but also in terms of existing music. How much did you write into the script, Tom?
None, really, none. So I can just happily sit back and let Sam talk about it. He had an incredible well, I'll let him talk about it, because honestly, yeah, nothing that I didn't really write. I wrote not a single bit of music or even a hint at that. So over to Sam.
Sure. I mean, well, I think I started building like a playlist for the film, like from the moment of kind of getting it, really. And that involved like thinking about Daisy as well, because it felt like the score was going to be, and Isabel Waller-Bridge, who wrote the music, would say the same. I think it was very much scored to Annette rather than, and some of the pieces are more genre pieces, but so you're building a playlist thinking about like what the themes are and stuff. It's very, very long. And then I do like a short list, which is still extremely long. And after that, then even though you do that in pre-production, oftentimes you don't really know if it's going to work with picture. So you get to the edit, and then you can try these pieces you've been carrying around for ages and go, this is going to be amazing. You put it on, it just doesn't take it. And it's so sad. And you go, okay, fine. No, it doesn't want that. It kind of rejects it. So then it becomes a case of what works with picture and what creates the desired effect. So obviously we're trying to create a lot of tension. And as Daisy was saying before about performance generated tension, I mean, so much of it is coming from performance and coming from what Annette is doing. So you're trying to not lead that and not push that too hard, but just kind of be a sort of underpin what she's doing all the time. And so I guess that's a long way of saying the score was kind of inspired by really 4 composers. There's Morton Feldman, and particularly an album called Rothko Chapel 2. He wrote these. I mean, he's just such a wonderful composer. I'm sure he must be used as temp for a lot of people because he's just wonderful. And he leaves a lot of space between. It's kind of sparse, actually. So it leaves a lot of space for tension to grow naturally. Then Johnny Greenwood, who is obviously just an absolute master of tension. It's sort of giving the everyday tension as well. And then Ligeti, we used a bit of Penderecki as well, who are like horror kind of stalwarts, the more screechy strings. A lot of that stuff didn't make the cut, but it was at least a good jumping off point, I think, for Isabel and for Daisy and Tom and Kate to see like the proof of concept, I suppose, before you start writing the score. Because music's very, I mean, thankfully we were very aligned as a team, on those things, because music really can divide people. And so, we're really pleased that, everyone got on board, and Izzo then wrote something that was completely her own and very specific to Annette, I think.
What about needle drops, about existing music, in terms of like, it's like the world's your oyster. It's like, where do you start with that journey of going, what's right? What do we want it to say? It's because there's the thing with existing music with needle drops is that there's everybody has people who know the piece have a connection to it in some way or another. So that's like is that something you consider, or do you just kind of shy away completely from that as well? Do you all have kind of opinions on that?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because for whatever reason, this could be very wrong. I tried to find tracks that aren't immediately recognizable, that you don't go, oh, it's that. Though there's value in that, obviously, when you go, oh, everyone loves this tune, because it kind of lets the audience in, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
But I guess where I was really satisfied is Out of Time, the Chris Follow version, was very much a kind of a piece that I was like, this should, I think, work. I think at script stage, I was like, this should be great, right? So I kind of shared it with Daisy and Tom, and I think everyone was excited. And this was before we'd even started shooting. Thank God that really worked on picture. I was like, okay, that's really good. So that was like a must-have. Then the other stuff like Black Magic, which is a pulp song, and then there's Forever by Roy Wood. I guess like tonally, sometimes it's the lyric that is like appealing. Like Forever has a great lyric. I wonder if who she'll be if she'll put the hurt on me. And that comes very early in the piece, and it's subtle, it's there if you want it, but I liked how it had just a bit of an ambivalent threat about it. And then Black Magic's kind of in the middle. It's really those 3 big needle drops sort of underpin the story. It's kind of in the middle if he's starting to find a bit of her strength, I suppose, and starting to turn. She's turned a bit of a corner there. She's putting lipstick on, albeit looking at a picture of Alicia. But she's definitely finding a bit of strength, and I think the lyrics there are quite good. There's one about you know, you only get to see the light just one time in your life, and it felt like that was right for her at the moment. Going, I've got to change this because I'm getting one spin of the dice, and I'm not going to waste it on this. So, and then I guess it's just like tonally, you hope that it all makes sense, you know, with the character,
And my one music request was the Pancake song, and that was just my ode to Matilda the movie, and all of the joy as a child and someone having magic inside them and all of that beauty. So that was something, and particularly in the relationship, because playing Annette, really the most important thing in Annette's life is obviously both her kids, but the relationship she has with her daughter Tilly. So that was something I really. And we actually did this really lovely movement thing with the amazing Polly, who does like worked on Elvis and
Polly Bennett.
Polly Bennett,
I love Polly.
Yeah.
She's amazing. She's like a wizard.
Yeah, so she came in, and we just had, and also I think that was actually really important in getting me and Hibber connected too, because we sort of did some choreography, but it was all what Hibber wanted to do. And then again on the day, it, you know, became what it became. But in rehearsal, having that time with Hibber was so important. But certainly in the film, it felt like, you know, this is Annette's really important moment of the week. She gets to do the pancakes with her kids, and this is that beauty. So having that sort of light-hearted moment before everything comes crashing down, that was important.
That's amazing. Polly's amazing. Like she's quite hard to describe. I mean, I know she's like a movement coach, I think is like her official title. There's so much more than that. It's kind of like, it's so clever. She's so observant of storytelling in people's, you know, being sort of thing. It's great. The other thing with the music side of things as well is that you've got to get clearance. You know, it's kind of that thing. If you attach yourself to a piece of music and then they're going, nah, sorry.
Yeah.
You're like,
and also, you know, I remember when we were doing post on this and all the amazing, and then watching other movies with incredible famous pieces, and you just almost pause and go, how fucking expensive must this be?
Yeah.
With the music alone, you know, you have like an opening sequence set to the Beatles and you go, that budget alone must be, you know.
Yeah.
You're so right. It's like, and sometimes it's like so upsetting because in fact, Out of Time is played, but it's the Stones version, not the Chris Farlowe version, really quietly at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but really quietly, like just to like link two scenes when they're coming out of the airport. And I was like, oh my God. And we were like, we've got this track, it's quite expensive. We're going to blast the thing as loud as we can, like play the whole thing. So there we go. That's the joy though.
oh man, it's so good. And it's like, you know, in terms of, you know, it's what's been great is you kind of talking about this project, and you know, it's when you find a rhythm with people and you find a kind of, you know, collaboration team, I guess, in a way as well. I guess, you know, Tom, in terms of when you think back to writing the script of what you wanted it to be an opportunity for Daisy to do, and now being able to kind of reflect on that slightly as well. Have you had a moment to kind of do that?
Yeah, like constant. And you know, you were so wonderful as well, the Q&A we did in Soho House, because we'd had so many amazing ones, and I kept saying to Daisy, there were so many moments where I remember we were on the news in New York, and she'd ask me a question and then she asked Daisy a question. I turned to listen to Daisy's answer and I was just going, we're on the news. This is so crazy. It's such a strange out-of-body.
So awesome.
It was amazing. So to that point, it was wonderful. And honestly, like I always knew Daisy would kill it. But I was away shooting as an actor in LA when the film was going on. So I was getting sent the dailies, and I had to almost stop myself fanboying over what they were creating back home because I loved it so much. But you know, Sam being the first person to come on, Shazzy as well was very, very early on. And as soon as they came on, I thought, my God, we've just got Sam was such an amazing, lucky find for not find for us, but the fact that he wanted to do it, he felt so emotionally invested in it. Not only did he have such an amazing cinema understanding of what the film could be and should be. Ideas. He had such an emotional connection to it. And then included in that was this, he saw things that we had never, Daisy and I hadn't even seen. So we got off the Zoom with him and I went, I don't fucking know that was in there. And you know, that then sort of carried on with everyone, like Nat, who did our costume design, all of these layers of the piece that they understood in a way that we wouldn't. I guess that's what happens when you get someone just focused on one aspect of it, costume design, music, editing, you know, that they focus in on something so they can really pick it apart. And I'd never been involved in the process from start to finish like that. So to watch, I guess, Daisy giving me the seed that I planted in my brain, and then the thing that would keep me up at night and I dream about and I'd write about it all the time for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I then had this very clear vision of what the film was going to look like. And it, of course, wasn't that. It was so much richer, so many more, it had so many layers to it that I didn't even understand to it. Like the depth of flavor to it was just incredible. And that's just a testament to every single person in every department. And, you know, we're talking about Isabel Waller-Bridge, her understanding of like this woman and the melodies she was coming up with. I thought, my God, it was almost like I could hear that before you'd written it. But as soon as you wrote it, I felt like I'd heard it before because she understood who Annette was, you know?
Yeah. Did you make a playlist for Annette at all, Daisy? Did you do that for roles where you kind of put music together? Does music circle around you at all in prep for roles at all?
I actually don't.
Yeah.
No, I tend to have my one song that gets me going in the morning if I'm a bit sleepy, and that tends to be I'm one of those people that play songs on repeat. So I had like my one song in the morning to wake up, but actually no, and that is also something I've been really struck by. We did a screening early on because we were in the edit and we were all thrilled. Chris, our editor, and Sam had done this cut that we were like, this is amazing. And then we were looking at each other going, have we drunk the Kool-Aid? Are we correct for thinking this is good? So we did a screening fairly early on to get some feedback from it. And what was really interesting, that night we met you, we did a screening for family and friends, and a few of the people had seen the film then. And they came out afterwards and went, God, it was so different. And I said, no, actually, it wasn't that different. It was really barely different. But what had been added was music and sound design. And on top of the music too, the sound design was unbelievable. And seeing even the film set, the world within that world, the cacophony of sounds and the sort of feeling of that space, then in comparison to the house and how quiet that is, all of these things, to Tom's point, all of these layers of things that as actors one isn't usually that aware of, the sort of progression of that. But I was really struck by how different people thought it was. And it was just music and tone, tone as in sound tone. And it was strangely not something in prep that I was thinking about too much, but then seeing it progress, the biggest leaps really in the film feeling like together were music and sound.
Sam, we've got to say thanks as well, because I know you're in the middle of filming and you've given us your lunch hour to come and do this, so very, very grateful for you doing that
it's such a pleasure. Yes, I'm in post now on something, so I'm in Bristol at Post House doing what we're doing today. We're doing the grade. So yeah, speaking of Daisy saying things coming together, it's strange when you add those, it's the polishes and, you know, and the detail of every single shot that a colorist is making is just unbelievable. It's all kind of there, isn't it, in the veins of the thing. So yeah, it's my pleasure.
And Daisy, I just want to take a second to say what a year, man, it's been like. I mean, so many great things that to have enjoyed, you know, watching you sort of, you know, flourish in, whether it be this or A Young Woman in the Sea, or Sometimes I Think About Dying, which was just astonishing. So, and then just looking at, you know, what's in the pipeline. Jesus Christ, you're busy. It's exciting, man. It's so great.
I mean, it strangely doesn't feel that busy. It's really, it felt like a really enjoyable process because we were in the States together and Sam was with us celebrating Magpie, and then we came to the UK and did it. The first few days after everything was sort of like finished and the film was out, I was like, oh my God, what do I do with my time? Because it's been so busy. But actually it's quite nice to have a little rest. But yeah, it's been a really it's been a great year. Yeah. And I think
Amazing.
just the sort of nature of being able to another Magpie, Morning Miss Magpie.
Wow.
The nature of, and I mean, you do it so much from film to film, the ways that worlds are created and the ways in which people tell a story and express their lives on the screen, to be part of, particularly this year, 3 such beautifully different films too, is really, couldn't be happier. Yeah,
such great women to celebrate, and you know, and strength in different ways and across the film. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. So great. Happy New Year when it comes. Well, here's to another brilliant, beautiful 2025. Congratulations to you all. It's really been a beautiful collaboration to enjoy, and thanks for chatting to me today. It's been lovely to hear more about the whole journey as well.
Thank you
Thanks so much, Edith.
Okay, take care, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks. See you later. Thanks a lot.